From River West, the greatest neighborhood in the world, right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, it's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. In a pretty good mood. What puts you in a good mood? Have you got a go-to strategy if you need a little mood adjustment? My problem, if I'm on the downward side of that wave, if I'm below the equator, I'm very bad at consciously getting myself out of it. I only recognize the successful strategy after it's over. It has to almost just happen naturally, and then I recognize it afterwards. Oh, okay, that worked. And then I kind of scold myself, as I often do, and we all know it. I mean, take a walk, get a little exercise, have a good meal, get a good night's sleep. The little things you do to make yourself well. And the moving your body is the obvious, easiest one to do. But I tell you, when I'm down, that's the hardest time for me to do what I need to do. So I'm in a good mood today because a couple of those great healing strategies just sort of happen naturally. And here's one. A lot of people really like to buy things. You've heard the term retail therapy. And I certainly know people, I've had people like this in my life, who a day doesn't go by where they don't buy something. Now, I'm not talking about your basic needs. If you need groceries or you need to buy some laundry detergent or something. No, I mean buying something just for the sheer pleasure of buying it, just for having something new, And normally, typically, I don't do that. I can't remember the last thing I bought just for the fun of it, because I decided a long time ago not to do that for two reasons. I was poor at the time when I made this decision. So it was just being frugal, or if you want to say being cheap, all right, I don't mind, call me cheap. But that dovetailed very nicely with the other reason, and that is that I really want to be a minimalist, because I know that everything I buy takes resources from the earth. It takes energy to manufacture and to ship and to package, I just didn't want to be a part of that world. I want to tread very lightly on the earth. It's a conscious decision I made. If I can't be of great service in the world, I want to be this great person who gets up every day and just saves the world every day, just makes all the difference. And I've mostly failed at that. But I thought, at the very least, if I'm not going to really be of any great service, at least I could not contribute to the damage. And of my handful of rock-solid fundamental beliefs, one of them is that consumption, especially within the confines of this weird corporate capitalist oligarchy we've got going on, consumption is the gasoline that fuels this evil engine. So I just decided a long time ago not to be a part of that. I get what I need. I have what I need. I have the tools of my trade. I have food. I have the clothes I need and a roof over my head. But I don't buy things. I'll go for days, weeks, months, years without buying anything outside of those necessities. Well, I bought something yesterday on a whim. It cost me $1.99 at CVS. I bought this delightful little metal back scratcher just because I had a whim. And I can't tell you how much pleasure this thing has brought me. It's kind of a, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I've got it in my hand right now. 2, 3, 4, 5-pronged kind of a claw, metal, and it's collapsible. So it's like a pointer. You can expand it or contract it. Very nice little kind of a rubber handle. And yeah, that's the spot. It feels so great. So I really do. I understand I understand the high people get with buying things. I really do. We spoke recently about my cable news addiction that I had years ago. And I did. I didn't tell you much about the addiction days. I've always been here. Let me collapse that. I've only told you. I've preached to you as a recovering addict about not going to cable news. But whatever your thing is, if it's cable news, if it's buying things, I totally get it, and I totally understand, and I don't label people or think less of them or preach to them about these compulsions. I was a serious cable news junkie until I was finally slowly able to sort of break that habit. And I learned how bad it was for me, how I was being manipulated and ill-informed and bombarded with, if you watch the cable news, it's half news and it's half drug commercials or car commercials or whatever other TV ads, whatever ads they run. It's just being sort of sucked into this world. And when I found the alternatives, and you and I have talked about this so often, I promise I won't get back into it. But when I found the alternatives of non-corporate news, there's still a million different ways you can get the information you need in such a wonderful, healthy way. It just felt great. But did I enjoy the high while I was there. So I understand it. Just like when I bought my little metal back scratcher. It just was such a little delight. So I'm in a good mood today. And it's not just because of my little back scratcher. That was just part of it. Another great contributor to getting me from the low side to the upside of my mood swings, which are, again, they're not severe. The other day, I went down to my car in the parking lot here behind my building, turned the key, dead silence, nothing going on, dead battery. Okay. So my errand on that day was not very important. I just decided not to do it. I also didn't call my insurance company. I've got the emergency road plan just because, I don't know, it was just the wrong time of day. I had other things to do. I just didn't want to deal with it. And that's another fault of mine. Do you share this? When you have something you need to do, it might be the simplest thing in the world, and you just don't want to do it because you have to. It's really not that big of a deal. They make it real easy for you. You just get out your phone, click on the app, get somebody over to give me a jump. I'm home. I'm not stranded out on the road. It's happening at my house. But I didn't do it on the spot. So the next morning I got up. And again, it's so irrational. That's our problem. That's my problem, is being totally irrational. I'm not even going to attempt to justify any of this. It's stupid and ridiculous, and I completely confess to it. I spent a whole day without my car because I just didn't want to deal. I had to do some grocery shopping. And normally I would drive to the store, but instead I walked. It's kind of a long walk that I wouldn't normally do, but I did that instead. And then, like magic, get that body moving. By the time I get home with my groceries, I'm in a pretty damn good mood. These things, they're so simple. We all know them. I don't know if you and I share this, but I have the hardest time taking action, doing things I know are good for me. It's because I was too damn lazy to call Geico and get the road emergency guy over to jump me. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to deal with the app and the phone calls and the waiting around for the guy for an hour and a half. It was stress-inducing. I didn't want to deal with it. I turned my back on it for a whole day and a half. But then as a result of that, I wind up walking kind of a lengthy walk to the store and back. And, hey, you know what? Get that body moving. Feel better. And then, I'm describing the last few days here. So then yesterday, I thought, okay, well, let's do this. So finally, clicked on the Geico app, went down to the parking lot to meet the guy. It took all of about 45 minutes. And I got that done because there's another one. There's the retail therapy. there's moving your body, and there's accomplishing a task. Now, you know me. I never, ever, have I ever preached to you about personal behavior. I talk about bigger things. I talk about grand things. I talk about political philosophy, how I think you ought to vote. But this personal stuff about feeling better, about health and psychology, that's not my thing at all. I never, ever do that. And I won't do that. And if it sounds like I'm doing that today, I promise you I'm not. I'm just telling you my story of why I'm in a good mood. Because I bought a back scratcher at CVS for $1.99. Because I moved my body and took a nice long walk to the grocery store and back. And I accomplished a task that needed doing. And I got it done. And now, even though the world sucks just as much as it did 3 days ago, and it does. Anyway, so there's my story. I just thought I'd share it with you today. Now, there is, I don't know, kind of a downside to the story I just told. Because after I experienced the last couple of days, and after I reflected on it a little bit, I thought to myself, as far as the whole feeling better when you're in a bad mood thing, maybe the very best strategy of all that I didn't mention, and that I didn't really do in the last couple days, the very best strategy is getting out of your own self and thinking about someone else and helping them, being of service to other people. Through personal experience and what little I've read on the subject, there's really almost nothing better you can do. When you're feeling bad for yourself, when you feel like things aren't going right for you, you find somebody to help. If it's the wintertime, help them shovel their walk. Or maybe just an old friend or a relative who you haven't spoken with for a while. Call them up, brighten their day. Or go bigger. Really just go volunteer. Do something big. Do something nice. Go donate blood. There are a million ways to give and to get out of your own head and to stop thinking about yourself and to help somebody else or help the world in general. It's so easy. It's so effortless. And it's so rewarding. Okay, so I'm having these thoughts. I'm contemplating this whole idea. And the evolution of this thinking takes me to the individual versus the group. Different societies in different parts of the world and different times in history. Some will focus on the individual, and then others are more geared toward the community, a more socialistic kind of way of thinking of the world. And a modern example of that, of course, would be, we often talk about Scandinavia. Very happy to have high taxes because they go to parks and health care and 3 years of paid leave when you have a baby. And you think about the group, you think about everybody. And then that reminded me, oh, you know what? I've been saving these articles to maybe talk about on the podcast sometime. And it was the term toxic individualism that caught my eye. Yeah, the headline caught my eye. It said, Toxic Individualism, Pandemic Politics Driving Healthcare Workers from Small Towns. And the story was kind of about this secondary pandemic of rural areas especially, where healthcare workers just couldn't take it anymore, and they're leaving in droves. They're literally moving out of their small towns and rural areas. Healthcare workers. Because they are so damn frustrated. Their communities just insist on defying mask wearing and social distancing, all the basics of the pandemic that we know we have to practice. These small towns, rural, conservative areas, just not cooperating because of what one of the doctors in the article is quoted as saying, it's toxic individualism. It's a mindset that's been with us for as long as there's been a United States of America. But still, it just seems even in the last few decades, it's become more and more pronounced as modern conservatism has taken hold in rural and small town America. Toxic individualism. I'd never run across that term before, but it resonated immediately. Oh yeah, I get where they're going with this. I understand that. I mean, there's always going to be a natural tension, right? As there should be. It's written right into the Constitution, this natural tension. The founders understood individual versus community. They have to look out for each other. Whatever laws we put together, it's the American imperative that we protect and uphold individual rights. Nobody argues with that. I'm totally down with that. It's also equally embedded into our founding documents that we're all in this together, that we have to look out for each other, that in this democratic experiment we're going for here, the will of the people must be heard, not just the will of the person, the will of the people, plural. So this tension between individual and community has always been there. You have to decide how they relate, where you draw the lines. It's a never-ending conversation. That's why it's liberty and justice for all, not just liberty for all, not just justice for all. If you only care about one of those factors, then you don't get America. And the idea of toxic individualism is when you only care about the liberty and nothing about the justice. It's looking at half of the equation. It's cutting the baby in half. And if you cut a baby in half, you just have a dead baby. So I was curious about the term toxic individualism. So I did a little search, and there were several entries that came up. Even though I hadn't heard the expression before, a lot of other people had, and they've been talking about it and thinking about it for quite some time. The earliest citing I could find was from 1989. Healing Technology, Feminist Perspectives, Women and Culture Series by Catherine Strother Ratcliffe. And the first citing of this term comes up, let's see. We need to guard against tighter social control, either in the form of toxic individualism, and it's in quotes, or techno-fix solutions. By toxic individualism, I mean such emerging areas as prenatal torts in which an individual woman might be held liable for exposing the fetus to hazards outside her control. So in the realm of feminist studies and a discussion on abortion rights, that's the earliest I could find this term, toxic individualism. And they do put it in quotes as though they're inventing it. I don't know. So this got me curious, and I continue looking, and I don't see the term again until 2015. Someone named Robin Tran, headline of the article, 3 Ways the U.S. Uses Individualism to Blame Victims for Their Own Suffering. And this is something I've thought a lot about over the years and talked about. Of course, there's the whole tradition of the pull yourself up by your own bootstraps thing. But there's this modern application that I don't know if you and I have spoken about this recently, but I know I've spoken about it a lot in the past. And that is kind of this new age version. The people who are very, very big on we create our own reality with our own thoughts. Manifest your thoughts into the world. You only have yourself. And you create the world you live in. And, you know, it all sounds very kind of wonderful and uplifting. But when you really listen to what they're saying, it's completely individualistic. The world has no power over me. If I want to be happy, then damn it, I will make that decision. I alone can make myself happy. It's only my thoughts. And this is really kind of a neo-new agey philosophy that a lot of people have. And it's not a left-right political sort of thing. Everybody seems to share this. They may be expressed differently. Like the right-wingers want to give it a religious paint job. And that's where you get this weird kind of, God rewards you. If you're a righteous person, you'll be rich, of course, because God will reward you. It's this religion of abundance. But then the lefty New Agers will do the exact same thing, just put it in different language. Now it's you manifest your thoughts into the world. But both of them, they're really talking about the same thing. And this writer, Robin Tran, takes a bit of a historical look at this. Give me liberty or give me death, a founding mythology. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, integral to the American dream. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeah, it's no wonder that so many of us have been sold on this idea from the very beginning. Until now, an entire national party. I mean, this is the Republican, this is the conservative foundation. It's their cornerstone, is individualism. individual liberty. But without the balance of communitarianism, without acknowledgement of the symbiotic relationship between liberty and justice. Robin Tran writes, and together maybe we can see that aggressive individualism is toxic for a society, and hopefully we can realize that we're all in this together. Yeah, toxic. Exactly right. So once again, this is from a feminist writer. I continued my journey here to see what others had said about this term, if anything. And then I found some articles from, 2019, and then a few from 2020. Let's see, August 23rd, 2019. Our individualism complex is as toxic as breathing polluted air. Column from a guy named Jordan Reif, staff columnist for the student paper at Case Western Reserve University, Cleveland. The powerful Me Too movement, beyond its success in holding influential men accountable, has brought to light the issue of toxic masculinity. That is, the idea that real men are not emotional, rely on violence to solve problems, or cannot stay home to take care of children, among many other limitations. However, a similar deeply rooted issue that is yet to be fully discussed and addressed is that of toxic individualism, which refers to the responsibility individuals have for themselves taken to the extreme. Initially, the term was used pejoratively in 19th century France, associated with laissez-faire economics and the selfish interests of aristocrats. Alexis de Tocqueville's understanding of the principle is noted in an 1856 publication in which he writes how individualism was, quote, not a word used by our ancestors, for no one could rely solely on themselves to survive and prosper. He cites some other historical references and continues, in a modern context, individualism as a social, political, and economic philosophy accentuates the worth and freedom of an individual, purporting strict self-reliance. In a low dose, individualism is good and healthy. It teaches decision-making and stimulates personal development. It suggests that as Americans, we can do anything or get anywhere as long as we work hard enough. Thus, failures are entirely our own fault. This pushes failures of society onto the individual, as well as blaming citizens for larger systemic injustices like poverty or prejudice. Behold, toxic individualism. A lot more sightings from recent posts. May of 2020, how America fell into toxic individualism. Our societal narcissistic streak has led to mass tragedy. This is a Psychology Today article referring again to the pandemic. A little later that year from author Will Bauer. Toxic individualism. Understanding why individualism fails, how it spreads, and how to discern healthy individuality from harmful ideology and behavior. His book, In Search of Why. And it might be easy, I'm tempted myself, to cast all the blame on my natural adversaries, right-wingers, conservatives, Republicans. It is, as I've already said, the cornerstone, the very foundation of their ideology. But I think everyone on the spectrum, all of us, we all need to be on the lookout, just watching over our shoulders. Is this creeping up on me? Is this starting to infiltrate my own thinking? Am I blaming myself a little too much? Am I beating myself up? Am I consciously or subconsciously blaming others for their own individual problems? Blind to the social rules, the structures, the institutions that connect us? Because those very structures, those very institutions, make it possible for us to absorb an ideology without us even knowing it. The last article on my little search was titled, How Design Contributes to Toxic Individualism and What Can Be Done About It. The world's 5 most valuable brands, which collectively account for nearly $1 trillion of annual revenue, have one thing in common beyond that they are all tech companies. They all promise to empower people. Microsoft says it aspires, quote, to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Apple asserts, quote, technology is most powerful when it empowers everyone. Google celebrates how it, quote, organizes the world's information and makes it universally accessible and useful. Facebook claims that it aims to, quote, give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. And Amazon talks of its famous mission to, quote, be Earth's most customer-centric company. The author writes, the shared language and sentiment in these mission statements are a testament to the dominance of human-centered design and its philosophy of prioritizing understanding and designing for people's needs before style and aesthetics. Indeed, human-centered design has been adopted by nearly every industry and has become a ubiquitous topic in business and design school curricula. But human-centered design has a blind spot that can no longer be ignored. Today, communities, nations, and humankind as a whole face crises that demand collective action, mitigating climate change, combating COVID-19, dismantling systemic racism, and protecting human rights are just a few examples of issues that won't be solved by designing for the immediate, narrow interests of individuals alone. In fact, individualism, which is on the rise, is a fundamental obstacle to our collective ability to address these issues. While human-centered design is, in theory, imbued with the principle that broader systems should be considered, in practice, the needs of individual users tend to eclipse consideration of communal needs. Human-centered design, with its focus on individual needs, risks being an agent of individualism. Products are too often designed for pleasure before sustainability, to mirror what people believe rather than broadening their perspective, to make things effortless instead of deliberative. Addressing communal needs requires inspiring collective effort and shifting collective behavior. And collective effort often requires individual sacrifice. So that term, toxic individualism, really struck me in the moment. And I spent the afternoon chasing it around. And if all these writers are correct, and I believe they are, well, what to do? What to do? Because this scourge really has embedded itself into the very way we think about the world. Private enterprise, the legislation that comes out of Congress, and as this last writer tells us, into the very heart of how we interact with the world, enabled by the design of the products in our hands. So what to do? I'm not sure. Don't know. Just going to have to preach. I don't know. Let me sleep on that one. All right. Well, I see that the tick-tock of the clock is telling me I should say goodbye. So let's do that. I say goodbye to you. I love you. Thanks for listening. I'm Charles Purcell.